Hey y'all, at the start of our poetry unit, we are talking about some structural elements of poetry, some of which we talked about a bit before, some are new, but this video is going to help go through some of the basics of what makes poetry poetry. Normally, poetry can be a lot of things, but here are some of the key elements. So, one key feature that separates poetry from normal, regular writing, also called prose, is that poetry is written in stanzas and lines, while prose, regular writing, is written in sentences. In normal writing, the words keep going until you get to a period, the final punctuation mark. And if you're writing a longer thing, the words go until they reach the end of the page and then they continue in the next line. And it just follows the page. But poetry doesn't do that, at least not normally. Poetry instead chooses where to end a line, not because it's the end of a sentence, but because of what the author wants to focus on. So a stanza is similar to a paragraph. A stanza in poetry is a group of lines that are linked together. You can see on the right here an example of a poem called We Real Cool. You can see it has a pair of lines and then a pair of lines, pair of lines, pair of lines, with a gap between each pair. So each pair is a single stanza. And the gap shows us that we're starting a new stanza. Just like in an essay, you would put a line break and put a paragraph indent to show a new paragraph. So stanzas are important because they group things together, again, similar to paragraphs, and they let us see where the poet wants our attention to be. We'll come back to that in a little bit. A second key part of poetry is meter. Meter refers to the rhythm of a poem. We talked about this back when we were looking at Shakespeare, who writes typically in a meter called iambic pentameter, this pattern of unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed. To be or not to be, that is the question. It's one of his favorite lines. To go for Romeo and Juliet, the prologue starts, two households both alike in dignity, in fair Verona where we lay our scene. Now, of course, no one would ever say it like that. I'm overemphasizing the meter, but you can hear there's a pattern, there's a rhythm to it. Now, not all poetry uses meter. We'll look at examples of types of poetry that don't use meter and are more free form, but a lot of poetry does. Songs are a type of poem, and most songs use some kind of meter. Think about the nursery rhyme, I blanked on the word for a moment, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Has a very regular rhythm. That's actually similar to this poem example on the screen. Emily Dickinson is a famous American poet, and in this poem, she uses a slightly more complicated meter. Every other line alternates between iambic tetrameter and iambic trimeter. Tetra means four. Think the game Tetris, all the pieces are made of four blocks. And tri means three, like a triangle with three sides. So her lines alternate between having four beats and three beats. I felt a funeral in my brain, and mourners to and fro kept treading, treading, till it seemed that sense was breaking through. So that's an idea of meter. Now, we are not going to learn all the different names of types of meter. You don't need to memorize those terms like iambic, tetrameter. But when you're reading poetry, try to get a sense for whether there is this regular pattern. Does it feel kind of musical in that way? That is the rhythm, that is the meter. One more technique we see in poetry structure is called enjambment. Enjambment means when a line in poetry ends not with a punctuation mark like a period, but just goes right through to the next line. So back to this first poem, we real cool, well, that's the end of the line, but it is certainly not the end of the sentence. There's no punctuation there. We left school. We, oh, still no punctuation. So these are all examples of enjambment, where the line ends just on a word, on a pause. Enjambment is a structural tool that keeps us reading because we're not at a stopping point. We want to keep seeing what's going on. And it puts emphasis on the first and last word of a line. Sometimes it can surprise us. At the end of this poem, for example, we die soon. That's a very sudden change in mood. And because of the enjambment, we have kind of this pause building suspense before we get to it. So we will see lots of examples of enjambment. Anytime the end of the line does not have a punctuation mark, that is an example of enjambment. Last but not least for today, repetition. Repetition is very common, not just in poetry, but in any writing or speech. Repetition just means that a word, phrase, or even an entire line is repeated over and over. It often provides emphasis, showing that whatever is being repeated is important, and it can help create some of that rhythm. So again, let's look at the same poem, which keeps repeating we something something, we something something. I haven't done it yet, so I'm just going to read the whole poem here for you. We real cool. We left school. We lurk late. We strike straight. We sing sin. We thin gin. We jazz June. We die soon. It's a short poem. It's a really interesting one. And you can see it uses this repetition, this we something something, we something something, to create rhythm and to emphasize this sense of self in this case. So those are the structural elements that we are looking at the start of this poetry unit. If you have questions on any of them, please don't hesitate to ask, and we'll keep seeing many examples as we read. Most of all, remember that poetry is about playing with language, breaking our expectations, breaking the normal rules in order to draw our attention to something or try to express something that normal writing just can't capture well enough. All right, good to see you all. Tune in next time.